The air at the St. Regis Charity Gala, thick with the scent of money and ambition, was about to be shattered. Among the city's elite, with champagne flutes clinking and diamonds flashing, a pregnant Amelia watched her husband, the man who vowed to love and protect her, and their unborn child, get down on one knee. But it wasn't for her. In front of everyone at a table, where each plate cost more than most people's rent, he proposed to her best friend. The gasp was collective, the silence deafening. But what they didn't know was that this public humiliation was just the opening act to a much darker play. The Astor Ballroom at the St. Regis was a symphony of excess. Crystal chandeliers, heavy as frozen waterfalls, dripped light onto a seas of designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos. The theme was Midnight in the Garden of Dreams, and the florists had taken it literally. Cascading arrangements of orchids, hydrangeas, and moonlit roses climbed the marble pillars, their cloying sweetness mingling with the expensive perfumes of the city's 1%. For most, it was the social event of the season. For Amelia Sterling, it felt like a beautifully decorated prison. She smoothed a hand over the gentle swell of her stomach, a 7-month curve barely concealed by the flowing silk of her custom-made Christian Siriano gown. The baby, a boy they had decided to name Leo, was a restless flutter beneath her heart, a secret anchor in the turbulent waters of her marriage. Her husband, Julian Sterling, stood beside her, a radiant sun, around which so many other celestial bodies seemed to orbit. He was devastatingly handsome, with a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes the color of aged whiskey that held a perpetual, confident gleam. He was the founder and CEO of Helios Innovations, a tech company that had skyrocketed into the stratosphere, making him a billionaire before his 35th birthday. Tonight, he was the co-chair of the Children's Literacy Foundation Gala, an irony that wasn't lost on Amelia. Julian, a man who hadn't read a book for pleasure in years, who saw words only as data points on a stock ticker, was being lauded as a philanthropist. His smile, a weapon he deployed with strategic precision, was plastered across his face as he shook hands with a portly banking magnate. "Amelia, my love," he said, turning to her, his voice a low purr that still, despite everything, sent a traitorous shiver down her spine. "You remember Mr. and Mrs. Davenport?" Amelia summoned a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Of course. A pleasure to see you both again. Your work with the hospital wing was truly inspiring." She said the right words, the ones expected of the wife of Julian Sterling. She was his greatest asset, the old money heiress from a respected family who had lent his meteoric new money rise an air of legitimacy. She was poised, elegant, and until recently, blissfully compliant. As Julian and Davenport launched into a discussion about market caps and leveraged buyouts, Amelia's gaze drifted across the ballroom. It landed, as it always did, on Chloe. Chloe was her best friend, or at least she had been. They had met in college, two girls from different worlds, Amelia, the quiet, thoughtful artist, and Chloe, the vibrant, ambitious socialite. Chloe was the kind of beautiful that was almost violent in its perfection. Tonight, she was a vision in a crimson gown that clung to her like a second skin, her blonde hair styled in a way that looked effortlessly windswept, even in the still, conditioned air of the ballroom. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a diamond necklace, a gift from Julian Amelia, new for her last birthday, flashing under the chandeliers. She was standing next to her supposed date, some forgettable European count she'd discard by the weekend. But her eyes across the crowded room kept finding Julian's. The affair wasn't a secret Amelia had discovered in a dramatic flurry of lipstick-stained collars or mysterious credit card bills. It was a slow, creeping poison, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of their lives. It was the way Julian's phone was suddenly always angled away from her, the late nights at the office, that coincided with Chloe's sudden passion for late-night yoga, the inside jokes shared between them in her presence, leaving her feeling like a foreigner in her own home. When she had finally confronted him 2 months ago, her heart hammering against her ribs, Leo, a nervous knot in her belly. Julian hadn't even bothered to deny it. "Amelia, don't be so naive," he'd said, his voice devoid of emotion as he adjusted his Patek Philippe watch. "It's just a bit of fun. It doesn't mean anything. Chloe understands the arrangement. It has no bearing on us, on our family." Our family. The words had felt like ash in her mouth. She had wanted to scream, to rage, to throw the lilac vase on the mantelpiece at his head, but the fight had gone out of her, replaced by a chilling, hollow calm. What was there to fight for the man she had married, the tender, ambitious young man who had once quoted poetry to her in Central Park, was gone. In his place was this cold, calculating stranger, a man who spoke of her best friend as an arrangement. She had stayed. For Leo. For the child who deserved a father, a home, a future. She had swallowed her pain and her pride, playing the part of the devoted wife while her world crumbled around her. She told herself it was a phase, that Julian would tire of Chloe, that the birth of their son would change everything and bring him back to her. She had clung to that hope like a drowning woman to a piece of driftwood. "Darling, are you all right?" Julian's voice cut through her reverie. His hand was on the small of her back, a possessive, proprietary gesture. "You look a little pale." "Just tired soon," she murmured, forcing another smile. "Leo's been active all day." "My boy?" Julian beamed, placing his own hand over hers on her stomach. It was a performance, all of it. He was playing the part of the doting father-to-be for the benefit of the Davenports, who were cooing appreciatively. He's going to be a titan, just like his old man. The hypocrisy was suffocating. As they were called to their table, the head table, front and center, Amelia felt a fresh wave of dread. Their table number 1 was a large round one, seating 10. Julian, as co-chair, was at the head. Amelia was seated to his right, and to his left, her name printed on an elegant place card in swirling calligraphy, was Chloe. Chloe's date, the Count, had been conveniently seated at a table across the room. "Isn't this cozy?" Chloe said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic as she took her seat. She leaned past Julian to address Amelia, the scent of her Tom Ford perfume, an assault on Amelia's senses. "Millie, darling, you look radiant. Pregnancy suits you." "Thank you, Chloe," Amelia replied, her voice tight. "You look vibrant." Julian basked in the attention, seated between his wife and his mistress. He was a king holding court, oblivious or perhaps indifferent to the emotional carnage he was creating. The first course was served, a delicate seared scallop with a saffron reduction costing more than a family's weekly groceries. Amelia pushed it around her plate, her appetite gone. The polite chatter, the clinking of silverware, the endless speeches about charity and goodwill all blended into a meaningless drone. Her focus was a tight, painful laser beam on Julian and Chloe. She saw the way his knee brushed against hers under the table, the way Chloe would whisper something in his ear, her red lips almost touching his lobe, sending a smug, triumphant glance Amelia's way. Every shared look, every secret smile was a fresh stab in Amelia's already bleeding heart. She felt a hand on her arm and flinched. It was Marcus Thorne, Julian's CFO, and Amelia had once thought a friend. Marcus was older a quiet, observant man, with kind eyes that seemed to see more than he ever let on. "Are you holding up Amelia?" he asked, his voice low and concerned, shielded from the others at the table. She gave him a weak, grateful smile. "Just a bit overwhelmed. It's a lot of noise." Marcus's gaze flickered towards Julian, a flicker of something unreadable, disappointment, disgust, before returning to her. "Julian is on form tonight. He always is," Amelia said, the bitterness coating her tongue. The main course arrived, a filet mignon that probably had its own pedigree. Then came the live auction. Julian, in his element, took the stage with the auctioneer, his charisma electrifying the room. He bid an extravagant $50,000 on a week-long stay at a private villa in Tuscany, presenting it as a future family vacation. The crowd applauded his generosity. Amelia felt sick. The family he envisioned now clearly included Chloe. She excused herself during a lull, needing to escape the suffocating ballroom. She made her way to the powder room, a lavish space of marble and gold fixtures. She splashed cold water on her face, staring at the woman in the mirror. Her eyes were shadowed with pain, her face pale beneath the expensive makeup. "Who are you?" she asked her reflection. "What are you doing? This isn't strength. This is surrender." Leo kicked a strong, insistent thump, as if in agreement. It was a wake-up call. She wasn't just Amelia anymore. She was a mother. Her son deserved more than a life built on a foundation of lies and humiliation. He deserved a mother who fought for him, who fought for her own dignity. As she straightened up, taking a deep, fortifying breath, her phone tucked away in her small clutch buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "He's not just cheating on you, Mrs. Sterling. He's cheating everyone. Check the Helios Q3 projections against the internal server data. He's building a house of cards, and he's about to light the match." Amelia stared at the message, her blood running cold. Internal server data, house of cards. It made no sense. Helios Innovations was the darling of Wall Street. Their stock was soaring. Julian was being hailed as a visionary, a genius. A cold, terrifying thought began to form in her mind, a suspicion so monstrous she could barely entertain it. But the message felt like a key, unlocking a door to a room she never knew existed. Julian's recent desperation, his frantic energy, his sudden obsession with public perception. Was it all connected? She returned to the ballroom, the anonymous text message burning a hole in her consciousness. The atmosphere had shifted. A hush had fallen over the crowd. The auction was over, and the dessert course was being cleared. A single spotlight now illuminated the small stage in front of the band. Julian was standing on it, a microphone in his hand. "Thank you all for your incredible generosity tonight," he began, his voice smooth and commanding. "We've raised a record-breaking amount for a cause very dear to my heart." He smiled, and the crowd swooned. But tonight is about more than just charity. It's about the future. It's about building something real, something that lasts. Amelia's heart began to pound, a frantic, panicked rhythm against her ribs. What was he doing? "There comes a time in a man's life," Julian continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, before landing with searing intensity, not on his pregnant wife, but on the woman seated to his left. "When he knows he's found his true partner, his equal, the person who challenges him, inspires him, and makes him want to be a better man, the co-architect of his dreams." He stepped off the stage, walking directly towards their table. The spotlight followed him. Whispers erupted around the room like wildfire. Amelia felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on her on their table. She felt naked, exposed, a specimen under a microscope. Chloe was looking up at him, her blue eyes wide with what looked like feigned surprise, though a triumphant smirk played at the corners of her lips. Julian stopped, not in front of Amelia, but in front of Chloe. And then, as the entire room held its collective breath, Julian Sterling, the billionaire philanthropist, the doting father-to-be, dropped to one knee. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He opened it, and even from her seat, Amelia could see the obscene sparkle of a diamond the size of a quail's egg. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a crushing weight. The only sound Amelia could hear was the frantic, terrified drumming of her own heart. "Chloe Bennett," Julian's voice boomed, amplified by the microphone still in his hand. "You are my future. Will you marry me?" The world didn't so much shatter as it did freeze. For a single, eternal moment, the Astor Ballroom was trapped in amber. The waiters paused mid-stride, their silver trays hovering. The soft music from the band died in a discordant sigh. Every face in the room, a gallery of the city's most powerful and influential, was turned towards table one. Their expressions a mixture of slack-jawed disbelief, scandalized delight, and pitying horror. Amelia felt nothing and everything all at once. It was a strange, dual sensation. A part of her, the logical part, registered the scene with chilling clarity, her husband Julian on one knee, the gargantuan diamond winking mockingly under the spotlight. Her best friend Chloe performing a perfect imitation of overwhelmed joy. But the other part of her, the part that housed her heart and soul, had simply gone numb. It was a system overload, a defense mechanism against a pain so profound it threatened to vaporize her on the spot. She didn't gasp, she didn't scream, she didn't faint. She simply sat, her posture unnaturally perfect, her hands resting on the swell of her unborn child, a silent porcelain Madonna in a sea of chaos. Her stillness was in its own way more shocking than any outburst could have been. Chloe, a consummate actress, pressed a hand to her chest. Tears, perfectly formed, welled in her eyes. "Oh, Julian," she breathed, her voice trembling for the audience. I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," Julian urged, his own voice thick with a manufactured emotion that made Amelia's stomach churn. He was looking at Chloe with an expression of adoration so intense, so public, that it was a declaration of war. He wasn't just proposing to Chloe, he was erasing Amelia. In that single grand gesture, he was rewriting their entire history, invalidating their marriage, their vows, their child. "Yes," Chloe whispered, and then louder for the back of the room. "Yes, of course, yes." The spell broke. A wave of sound crashed through the ballroom, a cacophony of gasps, shocked murmurs, and then scattered hesitant applause, mostly from Julian's sycophantic inner circle. Julian slid the ring onto Chloe's finger. It was a perfect fit. Of course it was. He stood, pulling Chloe to her feet, and kissed her a deep, passionate, possessive kiss that left no room for doubt. This was not a stunt. This was a coup. The spotlight, merciless and white-hot, was still on them. But its penumbra was large enough to include Amelia. She was part of the tableau, the silent, discarded prop. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, their pity, a physical force that was more suffocating than their judgment. They were watching her, waiting for the inevitable breakdown, the tears, the hysteria. They were waiting for the pregnant wife to play her part. Amelia's gaze met Marcus Thorne's from across the table. His face was pale with fury, his lips a thin white line. He made a move to stand, to come to her, but Amelia gave a minuscule, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Not here. Not now." Showing weakness was not an option. Something cold and hard was crystallizing in the void where her heart had been. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, sharp and clear. It was rage. Pure, undiluted rage. The anonymous text message pulsed in her memory. He's building a house of cards, and he's about to light the match. This spectacle wasn't just about love or lust. This was the match. Julian was burning down their life, and he was doing it in the most public way imaginable, ensuring she was left with nothing but the ashes of her dignity. Why? The question echoed in the silent, numb chambers of her mind. Why this public execution? Julian and Chloe were now accepting congratulations. People were swarming them, the opportunistic and the morbidly curious, eager to be close to the epicenter of the scandal. Julian, ever the showman, held Chloe's hand aloft, the diamond flashing like a weapon. He was beaming triumphant, a conqueror. His eyes, for the first time since he had gotten on one knee, swept over the crowd and landed on Amelia. There was no remorse in his gaze, no apology. There was only a cold, hard finality, a dismissal. It was the look a man gives to a problem he has just solved. In that moment, Amelia knew the man she married was well and truly dead. The hope she had harbored, the foolish belief that their son's birth would save them, withered and died. You couldn't resurrect the dead. Slowly, with a grace that felt utterly alien to the turmoil inside her, Amelia placed her palms flat on the white tablecloth. She pushed her chair back, the sound scraping softly in a momentary lull. She stood up. Every head that had turned to the newly engaged couple now swiveled back to her. A fresh wave of silence descended. Julian's smile tightened at the edges. Chloe's triumphant expression faltered for a fraction of a second. Amelia did not look at them. She looked past them. Her chin held high, her back ramrod straight. She turned away from the table. She began to walk. Her journey through the ballroom was the longest walk of her life. It felt like wading through tar. Each step was a monumental effort. She could hear the whispers trailing in her wake, feel the stares burning into her back. The pity was a physical blow. She focused on a point in the distance, the grand arched doorway leading out of the ballroom. It was her sanctuary, her escape. "Don't run," she told herself, her voice a firm command in her own head. "Walk." She passed tables of people she had known for years, business associates of Julian's wives. She had served on charity committees with friends from her past. Some looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Others stared with a kind of ravenous hunger for her pain. She saw it all, but she registered none of it. Her world had narrowed to a single path, a straight line out of this gilded hell. As she neared the exit, a hand gently touched her arm. She stopped, her body rigid, preparing for a confrontation. But it was Mrs. Davenport, the portly banker's wife. The older woman's face, usually a mask of socialite indifference, was etched with genuine compassion. "My dear," she murmured, her voice barely audible, "my car is just outside. Let my driver take you wherever you need to go." Amelia was so stunned by the simple act of kindness that for a moment she couldn't speak. She looked into the woman's eyes and saw not pity, but solidarity, a quiet understanding. She simply nodded, the lump in her throat, too large to form words. Once she was through the doors, the cacophony of the ballroom was replaced by the hushed efficiency of the St. Regis lobby. The air was cooler here. She could breathe, but the relief was short-lived. Her composure, held together by sheer force of will, began to crumble. Her legs felt weak, her vision blurred. The adrenaline that had propelled her through the room was fading, and in its place, a tidal wave of pain was rising. She stumbled, and a strong arm caught her. "Easy there." It was Marcus Thorne. He had followed her out. His face was a mask of grim concern. "I have my car. Let me take you home." "It's not my home anymore," she whispered the words, tasting like poison. The reality of it was finally crashing down on her. The penthouse overlooking Central Park, the life she had meticulously curated, the future she had envisioned, it was all gone. "Then I'll take you wherever you want to go," he said, his voice firm. "Amelia, you can't be alone right now." He guided her out into the cool night air, shielding her from the curious glances of the hotel staff. He led her not to the chaotic front entrance, with its throng of valets and taxis, but to a discreet side exit where a sleek black Audi was waiting. He helped her into the passenger seat, the leather cool against her skin. As Marcus pulled away from the curb, Amelia looked back at the Grand Hotel, its windows blazing with light. Inside that building, her husband was celebrating his new life built on the wreckage of hers. The numbness was receding completely now, leaving behind a raw, searing agony. The tears she had refused to shed in front of that audience of vultures began to fall hot and silent. She didn't sob or make a sound. The grief was too deep for that. It was a silent, internal hemorrhaging. She had lost her husband. She had lost her best friend. She had lost her home. Her life had been publicly and brutally detonated. Her hand went to her stomach, to the one thing that was still truly hers. Leo. He kicked again, a steady, reassuring rhythm. He was real. He was her future. The rage she had felt earlier returned, pushing back against the grief. It was a cold, quiet fury that settled deep in her bones. Julian had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he had broken her. He thought she was just a pretty docile accessory he could discard at will. He had humiliated her, yes, but he had also set her free. He had no idea who he had just unleashed. She pulled out her phone again, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked at the anonymous text message, the words glowing in the darkness of the car. "He's not just cheating on you, Mrs. Sterling. He's cheating everyone. Check the Helios Q3 projections against the internal server data. He's building a house of cards, and he's about to light the match." The proposal wasn't just a betrayal, it was a smokescreen, a diversion. While everyone was watching the sordid drama of his love life, what were they not watching? Marcus. She said, her voice surprisingly steady, cutting through the quiet hum of the car. He glanced at her, surprised by her tone. "Yes. I need you to take me to my parents' house," she said. "And then I need a favor. I need you to get me into the Helios internal server. I think my husband just did more than just ask for a divorce. I think he just confessed to a crime." The Thorne family's Georgetown estate was a fortress of old-world grace and quiet power, a stark contrast to the sterile glass and steel penthouse Amelia had shared with Julian. The air here smelled of boxwood hedges and generations of political influence. Her parents, a retired ambassador and a formidable corporate lawyer, had been roused from their sleep and were now flanking her on a chintz sofa in the library, their faces a mixture of fury and profound concern. Her father, Arthur Thorne, a man whose diplomacy had diffused international crises, was white with a rage so potent it seemed to shimmer in the air. "I will ruin him," he stated, his voice low and lethal. "I will call my contacts at the SEC, the Justice Department. I will personally fund a lawsuit that will strip him of every last dime." Her mother, Eleanor, ever the pragmatist, placed a calming hand on his. And we will, Arthur. But not yet. We will not be governed by emotion. Julian has declared war, and one does not charge onto a battlefield without a map. Her sharp, intelligent eyes turned to Amelia. The text message, she said. Tell me again exactly what it said. Amelia, wrapped in one of her mother's cashmere throws, recited the words that were now burned into her memory. Marcus, who had been standing grimly by the fireplace, stepped forward. Eleanor Arthur, if what Amelia suspects is true, this is bigger than infidelity. A public proposal to his mistress is bizarre, even for Julian's ego. It's reckless, unless... He paused, his brow furrowed in thought. It's not reckless at all. Unless it's a calculated distraction, a dead cat maneuver. Explain, Arthur commanded. You throw a dead cat on the boardroom table. Marcus said, the old political axiom sounding grim in the genteel library. Everyone will scream and shout about the dead cat. They'll be horrified, disgusted. But they won't be talking about the thing you really don't want them to talk about. Julian just threw the biggest, ugliest dead cat imaginable onto the table, while the entire financial world is gossiping about his sordid affair. What is happening back at Helios? The question hung in the air, heavy and ominous. The server, Amelia said, her voice gaining strength. Marcus, can you get me in? Marcus nodded slowly. Julian's arrogance is his Achilles heel. He trusts me. My access is high level. But viewing the kind of raw data the message mentioned, that's another level. It lives on a separate, heavily encrypted part of the server, known as Olympus. If I try to access it from outside the office, it will trigger alarms. Then we go to the office, Amelia declared, standing up. The cashmere throw fell away. The image of the weeping, humiliated wife was gone, replaced by a woman forged in the fires of betrayal. Leo kicked within her a surge of energy, as if he, too, were ready for battle. Amelia, it's 2 a.m, her mother protested, though there was a hint of admiration in her eyes. The gala is still going on, Amelia countered. The after-parties will last until dawn. Julian won't be anywhere near the office. No one will. It's the perfect time. An hour later, Marcus's Audi slid silently into the deserted parking garage beneath Helios Tower, a gleaming black skyscraper that pierced the heart of the financial district. The building was a monument to Julian's ambition, and tonight it felt like the belly of the beast. Marcus used his executive keycard to get them through security, the clicks of the locks echoing in the cavernous, marble-floored lobby. The security guard, a man Amelia had exchanged pleasantries with 100 times, barely looked up from his novel, accustomed to the CFO's late hours. The elevator ride to the 50th floor, the executive wing, was silent and tense. The offices were dark, ghost-like. The only light was the ambient glow of the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows. They walked past Julian's corner office, a vast space with a desk the size of a small car. Amelia averted her eyes, refusing to let the memories housed within those glass walls distract her. Marcus led her to his own, more modest office. He sat at his terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced ease. Okay, I'm in the main network, he murmured. The public-facing quarterly reports are pristine. Revenue up 30%, quarter over quarter, user acquisition exceeding all projections. According to this, Helios is a rocket ship. Now look at the internal data. Amelia urged, her hand resting on the back of his chair. The text said to compare them. This is the tricky part, Marcus said, his brow beaded with sweat. I'm going to have to create a ghost query piggybacking on a scheduled system diagnostic to get into Olympus without raising a flag. It's a one-shot deal. If it fails, The system will lock me out and notify Julian instantly. Amelia held her breath as he worked. The silence was punctuated only by the soft clicking of the keys and the hum of the computer. Minutes stretched into an eternity. "I'm in," he finally breathed. On the screen, lines of raw data began to populate spreadsheets, internal memos, projection models that were vastly different from the polished versions released to the public. "My God," Marcus whispered, his face pale in the monitor's glow. Amelia leaned in, her eyes scanning the screen. She wasn't a financial expert, but she was a quick study, and the discrepancy was so stark, so blatant, it was impossible to miss. The official reports showed booming corporate client acquisitions. The internal memos revealed that 3 of their 5 largest clients had terminated their contracts weeks ago, citing catastrophic security failures in the Helios software. The public numbers were a complete fiction. "He's faking the revenue," Marcus said, his voice a mixture of awe and horror. "He's been cooking the books for at least 2 quarters. He's reporting projected income from contracts that have already been cancelled, moving liabilities into shell corporations. This is massive. This is wire fraud, securities fraud. This is a multi-billion-dollar house of cards." Amelia pointed to a folder labeled Project Chimera. "What's that?" Marcus clicked on it. It was a series of encrypted emails between Julian and a handful of his most loyal and likely complicit engineers. "They're working on a new AI integration," Marcus read, scrolling quickly. "But the beta tests, they're a disaster. The AI is unstable. It's not just failing, it's corrupting the client's data systems it's supposed to be optimizing. That's why they lost the contracts." And then they saw it. An email from Julian sent just last week to the board of a major investment bank. In it, he was leveraging the spectacular and fraudulent third-quarter results to secure a final round of mezzanine financing to the tune of $500 million. The deal was set to close in 3 days. "That's the end game," Amelia said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "He's going to get that $500 million, and then the company will collapse as soon as the Q4 numbers have to be reported." "He won't be here," Marcus said, his eyes wide with realization. "He'll have vanished. $500 million wired to an offshore account, and he'll be on a private jet to a country with no extradition treaty, and Chloe would be with him." This entire charade, the public proposal, wasn't just a distraction, it was his exit plan. By creating a massive public scandal, he was giving himself a reason to flee the country. He would paint himself as a man so besotted with love that he was willing to give up everything for the woman he adored, escaping the condemnation of the press and his shrewish, vengeful wife. He would be seen not as a criminal, but as a romantic anti-hero. Chloe wasn't just his mistress. She was his co-conspirator, his partner in a massive criminal enterprise. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it almost knocked Amelia off her feet. He wasn't just leaving her. He was planning to leave her pregnant, humiliated, and holding the bag for his spectacular corporate implosion. The stock would be worthless. His assets would be frozen. Her name, inextricably linked to his, would be dragged through the mud. She and their son would be left with nothing but shame and debt. "Copy it," Amelia said, her voice like ice. "Copy everything. Every file, every email, every fraudulent spreadsheet. Put it on a drive and make 2 copies." Marcus worked quickly, his face grim. The progress bar on the screen was the slowest thing Amelia had ever watched. As the last file copied, an alert flashed in the corner of the screen. Unscheduled access to Olympus detected from terminal CFO01. System integrity breach. Lockdown protocol initiating in 60 seconds. We have to go. Now, Marcus snapped, yanking the encrypted flash drive from the port. They didn't wait for the elevator. They ran for the emergency stairs, their footsteps echoing in the concrete well. They burst out into the parking garage, their hearts pounding. As Marcus's Audi peeled out of the garage, Amelia looked back at the monolithic tower. It was no longer a symbol of Julian's success. It was a crime scene, and she had all the evidence. Back in the safety of her parents' library, as the first light of dawn broke over the city, the four of them, Amelia, her parents, and Marcus, sat around the mahogany table. The two small flash drives lying between them like unexploded bombs. The Gala proposal was the first shot, Eleanor said, her lawyer's mind piecing together the strategy. He needed to discredit his primary witness, you. If you tried to expose him after he fled, who would believe you? The hysterical, abandoned wife lashing out in a fit of jealous rage, or the visionary billionaire who gave it all up for love? He has controlled the narrative from the very beginning. But the narrative is about to change, Amelia said, picking up one of the flash drives. Her hand was perfectly steady. The shock and grief had been burned away, leaving behind a core of cold, hard resolve. She was no longer just fighting for her dignity. She was fighting for her son's future, for every employee Julian was about to betray, for every investor he was planning to defraud. Dad, she said, turning to Arthur, you said you wanted to call your contacts. Get me a meeting with the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, the most aggressive one you know. She then turned to her mother. Mom, I want you to assemble the best divorce and asset recovery team in the country. He thinks he's leaving me with nothing. I'm going to leave him with nothing but a prison cell. Finally, she looked at Marcus. Marcus, he's going to know someone inside helped me. He's going to come for you. Let him, Marcus said, his expression firm. I helped him build that company, and I believed in it. Now, he's turned it into a weapon. I'll take my chances with the fallout. It's time to burn the whole thing to the ground. Amelia nodded, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time that night. Julian had lit the match, but she was the one who was about to control the inferno. The game had changed. He thought he was playing chess, sacrificing his queen to win. He had no idea. He was playing against a woman who was about to overturn the entire board. The 3 days following the gala were a masterclass in controlled chaos, orchestrated from the war room of the Thorne family library. While the financial tabloids and gossip sites feasted on the salacious details of the gala of betrayal, Amelia worked with the quiet, lethal precision of a sniper. She was no longer the victim. She was the architect of Julian's demise. On day one, her mother, Eleanor, assembled a legal dream team. They worked around the clock, filing an emergency petition with the family court, citing extraordinary circumstances of spousal emotional distress and potential dissipation of marital assets for criminal purposes. They requested an immediate ex parte freeze on all known assets held by Julian Sterling and his associated entities. They attached the first few most damning documents from the flash drive as a sealed exhibit, just enough to prove their case without revealing their entire hand. A sympathetic judge, a contemporary of Eleanor's from law school, signed the order by noon. The first move had been made. Julian's American bank accounts, his brokerage funds, his real estate holdings, all frozen solid. He just didn't know it yet. On day 2, her father Arthur secured the meeting. Amelia, flanked by her parents and a stern-faced federal prosecutor named Anna Devereaux, walked into the U.S. Attorney's office. Devereaux was a formidable woman with a reputation for putting white-collar criminals behind bars for decades. Amelia dressed not in mourning black, but in a sharply tailored navy blue suit, laid out the story with methodical calm. She didn't cry. She didn't rail against her husband's infidelity. She presented the facts, and then Marcus, granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, walked Devereaux through the labyrinthine fraud, explaining how Julian had built his house of cards. He handed over the second flash drive. Devereaux listened, her expression unreadable. When they were finished, she leaned back in her chair. Mr. Sterling's public spectacle was his undoing, Ray, she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. He was so focused on discrediting you as a wife, he forgot you could be a witness. We will be seeking a warrant for his arrest and the seizure of all Helios Innovation servers by morning. The final piece of Amelia's plan was the most delicate, the narrative. Julian had tried to paint her as the scorned woman. She was about to repaint the masterpiece. She granted a single, exclusive interview to Sarah Jensen, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist from the New York Times, known for her in-depth, compassionate yet unflinching profiles. They met not in a stuffy office, but in the nursery Amelia had designed for Leo. It was painted a soft, calming sage green, with a mural of a gentle forest scene on one wall. Amelia sat in a rocking chair, the picture of serene, resilient motherhood. She didn't trash Julian. She didn't even mention Chloe's name. "I loved my husband," she told Jensen, her voice quiet but firm. "But the man I married disappeared a long time ago, replaced by someone I no longer recognize." This isn't a story about a broken heart. It's a story about a profound breach of trust that goes far beyond our marriage. It's about the hundreds of employees who poured their lives into Helios, the investors who believed in a vision, and the integrity of the market itself. I'm doing this for them, and I'm doing this so that my son can one day know that his mother chose to stand up for what was right, no matter how painful it was. The interview was a masterstroke. It transformed her from a pitiful figure into a reluctant hero, a woman of substance and principle. She had seized control of the story. The trap was set. All they had to do was wait for the animal to walk into it. The call came on the third day, just as the financing deal was set to close. It was Julian. His voice, for the first time Amelia could ever remember, was laced with panic. "Amelia, what the hell is going on?" he snarled into the phone. "My accounts are frozen. The funds for the mezzanine deal won't clear. What did you do?" Amelia took a sip of chamomile tea, her heart steady. "I believe my lawyers sent your lawyers a notification, Julian. It's called an asset freeze." "An asset freeze? Are you insane? You've jeopardized a $500 million deal. This will ruin the company." "No, Julian," she replied, her voice as cool and clear as a winter morning. "You ruined the company when you started faking your revenue reports. You ruined it when you lied to your clients and your investors. You ruined it when you decided to defraud everyone and run away with your mistress." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. He hadn't thought she knew. He had underestimated her completely. "How?" he stammered. "You were so busy planning your dramatic exit, you didn't notice the stagehands were changing the set," she said. "The deal isn't happening, Julian. The money isn't coming, and there's an FBI team on their way to your office as we speak." She heard a sharp intake of breath, the sound of his world collapsing. "You bitch," he whispered the word, filled with venomous disbelief. "You scheming, manipulative bitch. You have no idea," Amelia said softly and hung up the phone. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Julian Sterling, the tech visionary, was arrested in his office attempting to wipe the servers. The image of him in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury and humiliation, was on every news channel within the hour. Chloe, apprehended at her luxury apartment with 2 packed suitcases and a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands, was arrested as a co-conspirator. The story of their sordid affair was now a footnote to one of the biggest corporate fraud cases in a decade. Amelia's interview was published the next morning, a stark and powerful counter-narrative to the scandal. She was lauded for her courage and integrity. The employees of Helios, though facing an uncertain future, saw her as their champion. Marcus Thorne was appointed interim CEO, tasked with working with the SEC to salvage what was left of the company. A week later, Amelia was at the penthouse, accompanied by her mother and a court-appointed official to retrieve her personal belongings. The space, once a symbol of her gilded cage, now felt like a soulless museum of a life she no longer wanted. As she was packing a box of her art supplies, she saw it on Julian's desk, a small, leather-bound book of poetry. It was the one he used to read from when they were first dating, filled with verses by Neruda and Rilke. Curious, she opened it. Tucked inside was a faded photograph she had never seen before. It was of a younger Julian, perhaps in his late teens, standing with his arm around a frail-looking woman, with kind eyes, his mother. And next to them stood a smiling teenage girl with familiar, vibrant blue eyes. It was Chloe. Amelia's blood ran cold. She turned the photo over. Scrawled on the back in faded ink were the words Julian, Chloe, and Aunt Mary. Summer 1999. Chloe wasn't just his mistress, she was his cousin. The realization hit Amelia with the force of a physical blow. The deception was deeper, darker, and more twisted than she could have ever imagined. Their entire relationship, Chloe's friendship with her, it had all been a long con. They were family partners in crime from the very beginning. They had likely targeted her, the quiet heiress, with the respectable family and deep pockets, as the perfect mark to fund and legitimize their ambitions. Her marriage hadn't just been a failure, it had been a fraud. From the moment she said, "I do," her mother saw her expression and rushed to her side. "Amelia, what is it?" Amelia simply handed her the photograph. Eleanor stared at it, her sharp legal mind processing the horrific implications. "Oh, my dear God," she whispered. "This changed everything. It wasn't just fraud. It was a conspiracy of a deeply personal, almost monstrous nature. It was a level of sociopathic deception that would not only guarantee a longer prison sentence, but would also utterly annihilate any public sympathy Julian might have clung to." Amelia looked out the penthouse window at the vast expanse of Central Park below. She had thought she was at the end of the battle. She realized now that she had just uncovered the true nature of the enemy. She placed a protective hand on her stomach. "Mom," she said, her voice filled with a new chilling resolve. "Call Anna Devereaux. Tell her we have new evidence. Tell her this was never about an affair. It was a family business." Julian thought he had lost his company. He was about to lose the rest of his life. And Amelia Sterling, the woman he had tried to destroy, would be the one to lock the door and throw away the key. In the end, the woman they tried to cast as a fool became the queen who checkmated them all. Amelia's story isn't just about surviving a scandalous betrayal. It's a masterclass in reclaiming your power when the world expects you to crumble. Armed with the truth and an unbreakable will, she didn't just expose a cheater, she dismantled a criminal empire built on lies, protecting her son's future and delivering justice. The photograph wasn't just a final twist. It was the key that locked them away for good, proving their conspiracy ran deeper than anyone knew. Her journey from a humiliated wife to a formidable force reminds us that the greatest strength is often forged in the hottest fires of betrayal. What did you think of Amelia's ultimate revenge? Let us know in the comments below. If you were captivated by her story of resilience and justice, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves a story of epic payback, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable tales of drama and triumph. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.